going on? Welcome into Matt Bernier Show, DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forms Twitter handle at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forms Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. This is the preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show. Only going to be taking a look at two races from Saratoga coming up on Saturday because I think we want to start off with a little bit of a different topic this week and a discussion point, and really it will be no surprise once you find out what that ends up being. Those of you that listen to this thing in podcast form, like most of you, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. If you listen over on YouTube, click that subscribe button. You'll get all the latest offerings from DRF TV. Give us a thumbs up. If you're over on iTunes, write us a little bit of a review. Give us a positive rating. All of it is always greatly, greatly appreciated. I say that we start with a little bit of a different topic, and we'll only go over two races this week because we found out on Wednesday afternoon that Justify was officially retired, and kind of the worst-kept secret that we had going. We all kind of assumed this was the path that we were headed down, but until it was official, you never knew. You could hold out hope. It sounds like, again, that little bit of a filling, the filling that he's got in his ankle is just not going away, and in order to get enough time for him to get back to the races, and the goal would have been to get to the Breeders' Cup Classic, there's just simply not enough time, apparently. And look, again, they got to do right by the horse. I don't begrudge anyone for that. But I think before we dive into what I kind of wanted to bring up as far as this whole topic is concerned, where do I stand, and what kind of feeling is there for Justify? I brought it up yesterday on Twitter, and you can go over and find the tweet. You know, when you look at his overall body of work, where is he going to stack up in time as history goes on? He's going to be very polarizing, I think, simply because, first, let's look at his PPs. He's only raced 6 times. He debuted in February. He was done by June. He never faced older horses, let alone beat older horses, but he accomplished something only 12 other horses in the history of American racing have accomplished. So you can't diminish what he accomplished. You can't sort of poo-poo that. That's a major, major piece. He is one of 13 ever. He's going to go down as again, one of a handful that have ever done something. That puts him in sort of special category regardless of what you thought of the horse overall. But I think when you look at just recent memory and you think of recent horses, he's, whether it's deserved or not, he's always going to be compared to American Pharoah because they did the same thing 2 years apart, 3 years apart. And I brought this up a few weeks back, right after he won the Belmont Stakes, comparing and contrasting Justify and American Pharoah. And for a number of reasons, I think you have to look at American Pharoah and say, through the Belmont Stakes, he was the better horse because of how fast he had run and just a number of different things. He had showed different running styles, X, Y, and Z. And this is not meant to be a bash against Justify. All of you Justify pom-pom wavers that continue to say, oh, you're just disappointed you didn't cash tickets. No, it has nothing to do with that. We're past that point now. Now it's about trying to figure out where does he actually stack up. And this happens in other sports, so why can't it happen with our sport? I don't think he was as good as American Pharoah through the Belmont. Now, the problem, and the reason I say I feel kind of incomplete with Justify, is because I don't know that, I know. We'll never see how good he could have been. Was there the scenario where he goes off and he can win races by 15 lengths? Is there a scenario where he can go off and earn a 120 Beyer speed figure like American Pharoah did, like Arrowgate did, like California Chrome essentially did? I think his career top was 119. We never got to see if he was capable of doing some of those things. Could he run as fast as a Shared Belief? Could he run as fast as some of these other horses that we've had in recent memory? A Frosted who can go out and blitz a field in a giant, giant prestigious race like the Met Mile. We're never going to find out what Justify could have turned into. And that's why, to me, he feels a little bit incomplete. And I'm going to be very, very interested to see how does time handle Justify? Because you can't argue with what he accomplished, but he's going to be a polarizing one regardless, because some people are going to say that he was capable of doing all of those things and then some, and then there are going to be the other people that look at it and say, he never really ran all that fast. He ran fast, but never spectacularly fast. I think that's the way that someone put it on Twitter when I posted that little comment. He never ran spectacularly fast. Career top of 107, and that came in his 3rd lifetime start. He is an unbelievably gifted horse, and I think from where we are now, we all need to just kind of approach him and look at him and say, let's hope that he passes on not only his brilliance, but what Scat Daddy was turning into before, unfortunately, he passed away, and just continue on that sort of pass along the good genes. It's all we can hope for at this point. For the most part, he was sound. Obviously, this little filling piece, whether you fully buy into the fact that this was a major issue or not, and again, I think this is one of those pieces where it sounds like, they're taking a very, very precautious situation here, because not only is he worth this much at stud, but realistically, what good does it do to run him back again? You're not going to gain anything. You really can only lose things here. But selfishly, from a racing fan standpoint, from an analyst standpoint, I'm not sure how I'm going to look at him in time as time goes by. Then it got me to think, who can I even compare a horse like this to? Because again, Pharoah I don't think is an accurate sort of comparison, although he's going to continue to be compared to him because they're the two most recent ones to win the Triple Crown. But Pharoah at least went on and ran 3 more times. And he won the Breeders' Cup Classic. He beat older horses. He did all that kind of stuff. So I started thinking about it a little bit. And we're going to go in sort of reverse chronological order. Well, chronological order, I guess, if you want to say, going to the oldest sort of horse through recent memory anyway, up until the most recent one. And I think the final horse that I'll talk about is probably the most accurate, or the closest one anyway, in my opinion, to Justify. But let's start off with Pulpit, okay? Pulpit, we're going to pull up his PPs right now. And you can see Pulpit was a horse. He only ran 6 times in his career. He debuted in January of his 3-year-old campaign, very similarly to that of Justify. No 2-year-old foundation. He goes out, and all he does is fire off triple-digit buyers. So now Justify earned 5 out of 6. Pulpit earned 6 out of 6. Pulpit did not win the Kentucky Derby. He lost on 2 occasions. He finished 2nd in the Florida Derby, and he ran 4th in the Kentucky Derby, and then we never saw him again after that. Now, we can only hope that Justify turns into Pulpit in his second career as a stallion, because Pulpit, we know what he was capable of and what he produced, ultimately going on to produce horses like Tappet, and that's the most obvious of them. But the point is, he won at 7/8, he won at 1 1/8. We know that Justify won between 7/8 and 1.5 miles, but they were very brilliant horses. They were fast horses, but they were like that, gone. This horse debuted in January, was gone by May. So I think that's a fair comp if you're looking at it from like a real estate standpoint. You can't compare things that aren't really the same. They've done certain things, or they have certain things that are the same, but you can't really compare them. I think this is a pretty fair comparison, a decent comp. Pulpit and Justify, how quickly they showed up on the stage and how quickly they were gone, and what they did while they were here. The second horse that I think is a reasonable comp. He might be the weakest of them all. And I want to credit Dan Torgman. I believe it was Dan Torgman, Danonymous Racing on Twitter, one of the co-founders of Equestricon, with bringing up this horse, Smarty Jones. We're going to look at Smarty Jones' PPs right now. And the reason I have kind of a more difficult time making the comparison to Smarty Jones with Justify, you can see that he got to the Belmont Stakes, and I understand we all know what happened there where he lost to Birdstone. But he had I don't want to say a decent 2-year-old foundation. He only ran twice as a 2-year-old. But he never really had any sort of a gap. He went right from November. He ran twice at Philadelphia Park, which is now Parks, obviously. Then right after New Year's Day, he was at Aqueduct. And I suppose, if you want to call that a little bit of a layoff, from January 3rd to February 28th, excuse me. But then he ran consistently through on. The reason that I can't really make a super strong comparison here is because, to me, the glaring difference between a Smarty Jones and a Justify, yes, Justify won the Triple Crown and Smarty Jones did not. Smarty Jones ran fast, legitimately fast on a couple of occasions. He earned a 112 buyer in the Rebel down at Oaklawn Park, and then he came back with that smashing 118 buyer in the Preakness. Justify, again, if you take that 107 out of his PPs, his career best fig was his debut at a 104. He's a very fast horse, but not exceptionally fast, like a horse like Smarty Jones. And say what you want, I know he didn't turn into anything as far as a sire, but he didn't have great breeding to begin with, and he just happened to be an unbelievably fast horse. So I think, to me, of the 3 horses that I'm bringing up as far as comps are concerned, he is the third of the 3. I think Pulpit is the second that I can make the most accurate sort of comparison to Justify, and that leads into the third horse, who I think is, in my opinion, the most accurate sort of comparison as far as comparing recent horses and what they did and how quickly they came and went. And that's Big Brown. Big Brown raced 8 times in his career. He was a winner 7 times. Only loss came in the Belmont Stakes where he was eased. The reason, though, I think you can make many of the sort of similar parallels between Big Brown and Justify. You look, I understand Big Brown ran as a 2-year-old, but that was at the end of the Saratoga meeting, and then he didn't run again until March of his 3-year-old campaign. So the fact that he went out and did what he did at Saratoga, fine, great. He ran unbelievably fast on turf, awesome. But really, you had a 6-month gap between his first and second lifetime starts. So to me, all of a sudden you're looking at a horse that essentially is coming in with 0 foundation, let's be honest. Going into that N1X down at Gulfstream Park, he goes off and wins by the length of the stretch with a 106 Beyer, follows that up with the Florida Derby, and then follows that up with the Kentucky Derby. So I'm looking at that saying, to me, that's very reminiscent of what we saw from Justify, where he went from the Maiden Special to the N1X to the Santa Anita Derby to the Kentucky Derby. Now, you look at it from a speed figure standpoint, Justify in the Kentucky Derby earns a 103 Beyer, and then he regresses in the Preakness to a 97. You look at Big Brown, he wins the Derby with a 109, regresses to a 100 Beyer. So you've got some similarities there. Big Brown, I think, had a little bit more versatility from a running style standpoint as opposed to Justify, but you've got parallels there. You get to the Belmont Stakes, everyone and their brother knows what happened there with Big Brown, and everybody and their brother knows what happened there with Justify. That's something that Justify will have over almost every horse that will ever race in North America. I shouldn't say North America, in the United States. He completed the Triple Crown, where many of these other horses came close and couldn't get over the hump and couldn't finish the deal. So that's something that Justify has in his corner that you can never, ever take away. You see with Big Brown, though, he follows up the Belmont Stakes. He comes back, and he wins the Haskell, and then he wraps up his career winning the Monmouth Cup against older horses with a 105 Beyer. I think he fits in here very nicely as far as speed figures are concerned, as far as comparing the two. Justify a little bit slower in the grand scheme of things. Again, career best 107, but he usually lived in that low 100 range as opposed to a horse like Big Brown, who may be closer to the mid 100 range when it was all said and done. I just think the fact that they came on as quickly as they did, and at least with Big Brown, you got technically a full year out of racing with him. You know, he debuted in September of 07, and he wrapped up in September of 08. But the fact that it felt like he went from 0 to 100 overnight, coming back in March and then winning the Derby 2 months later in his 4th lifetime start. Whereas Justify, he showed up in February, and 3 months later, he wins the Kentucky Derby in his 4th lifetime start. So I think there were some parallels there. From a speed figure standpoint, he's probably a little bit closer to Pulpit than he is a Big Brown. Because Pulpit, he had those big numbers, but he was occasionally one that could throw in. But you know what, I look at it, I say that, with the exception of the Florida Derby, Pulpit's lowest Beyer was a 104, so he was even faster than Justify was. But I kind of feel like it's probably a mix of Big Brown and Pulpit to get something close to what Justify is. And Smarty Jones, just simply because he got as close as he did to winning the Belmont Stakes, there's a comp there. But again, from a speed figure standpoint, he was just considerably faster than Justify. This was just something that I thought would be an interesting sort of thing to do right now, considering this just happened and we're looking back on it. For me, as this is being recorded on Thursday, it just happened less than 24 hours ago. But I'm going to be fascinated to see. And if you have agreed, disagreed, whatever else it may be, if you're on YouTube, fire away in that comment section just below the video player, and over on Twitter, fire away at me at Bernier_Matt. Agree, disagree, whatever else it may be. Time is going to tell us how Justify is remembered. Right now, you have a lot of just very, very heated, passionate defenses and criticisms against the horse. You can't deny what he did. He came in, he was like a comet. I made that comment about Arrowgate at his absolute best right before his form absolutely tailed off, and how he felt like a comet. Through the sky. He was here and he was gone. Justified times 5. Because he showed up, he did what he did, he buried everyone, and he left. And who knows? Who knows what he could have ended up being? And that's the one thing that just sticks with me. Who knows what he could have ended up doing? What he accomplished was unbelievable. But there is just that little bit in me that would have loved to have seen him go on, even if it was just against 3-year-olds and the Haskell and the Travers. And I know this was more an injury issue than anything, but especially the Breeders' Cup Classic. Take on older horses, some good older horses, and see what you can do. To me, it just feels like the career is going to be a little bit incomplete, and it sounds absolutely unfathomable that I could even think that, considering all he did was win the Triple Crown. Justify is retired. Let's hope he passes on the Scat Daddy genes and all of his brilliance as a sire. Let's dive into a couple of races, though, for this upcoming weekend. Only 2 of them. And now that Justify is gone, races like the first one we'll talk about become that much more important. The Jim Dandy. Justify is gone. Now what? Let's take a look at the field for one of the featured events anyway at Saratoga Saturday afternoon. The Grade 2 Jim Dandy, 1.125 miles on the main track for 3-year-olds. It's a short field. There's only 5 that are going to go in this spot. And you can get all the sort of expanded analysis and whatnot over on video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Forums YouTube channel. This race, to me, boils down to pace. Plain and simple. We're going to take a look at the Timeform US Pace Projector, and you can see they've got things pretty well strung out. The 1, the 3, the 4, and the 2, with the 5 coming up in last. And really, that's kind of the way that I'm looking at this thing. 2 of your more likely win contenders are Tenfold, the number 2 horse, and Vino Rosso on the far outside, the number 5. Vino Rosso goes out for Pletcher. The problem with Vino Rosso has always been, it just doesn't seem like the light has gone on for him. Now, I'll give him credit. In the Belmont, I thought he took a shot at Justify, and he just got turned away by a better horse, and there's nothing wrong with that. But he doesn't really have a heck of a lot of early tactical speed, and now there's a part of me that wonders, are we going to be at a point in time where he's going to be coming from dead last when the pace might be 48 and change for a half mile? If he's that good, then great. Maybe he's taken that step forward that's necessary. But I kind of feel like this is a very important race, and I know it's only 5 horses. I feel like the Curlin that's going to be run on Friday, the Haskell that's going to be run on Sunday, and I normally would have gone over the Haskell, but they haven't even drawn the race yet. This is important now because this 3-year-old division is kind of in tatters. So you know you're going to end up having good magic down at Monmouth on Sunday. Hopefully he is ready to roll and does what he's capable of doing. We know that he's in good hands with Chad. Vino Rosso is in great hands with Todd. But he needs to finally prove that he can put it all together and actually go out there and prove and show that the hype surrounding him for quite some time, myself included, I've been waving the Vino Rosso flag saying he is one of the more talented runners. He's got to put it together. And I'm hopeful that Sunday is the day, or Saturday is the day, excuse me. The problem might be he could be severely pace compromised. Then you get a horse like Tenfold. Tenfold, I was a little bit chilly going into the Preakness. I said, you know what, that Arkansas Derby, I didn't really like it. His run prior to that, though, that N1X, it was promising enough. Then he comes back and he runs bang up in the Preakness. And I said, you know what? I think he's more of a 1.125 miles kind of horse, and I wonder if Saratoga is going to be his time to shine. And what do? They wheel him right back 3 weeks later for the Belmont. And in the grand scheme of things, he had some issues. He was checked down on the inside early on, and I thought he finished quite well. I think it's better than it looks, that race in the Belmont Stakes. Shows up here now, very similar to Vino Rosso. You're going to be pace compromised because you don't have a hell of a lot of early speed. He's probably going to be positioned mid-pack in a spot like this. The pace projector has him in 4th in a 5-horse field. So if you think that your 2 main contenders, your 2 favorites, are going to be coming from 4th and 5th in a race that could lack some pace, and I know Timeform didn't assign that blue bar, but I think it's going to be kind of soft, and there's a horse that could be forwardly placed, and Timeform has him right on the front end. He doesn't like to quit when you get him out there, and that's Flame Away down on the inside. Now, Flame Away's most recent start in the Ohio Derby was not good. The fractions interior was slow. He was out there. He took a little bit of heat early on, but again, the fractions, it's not as though they were going all that fast, and he packed it in quite badly, and he was beat by over 5 lengths. Now, the good news, if you are someone like myself, who is going to be picking Flame Away in this spot, the 3rd and 4th place finishers have at least come back to acquit themselves quite nicely. Trigger Warning and the 4th place finisher, they both came back. I believe it was Title Ready. They came back and they ran in the Indiana Derby, and they earned 94 and 92 buyers, respectively. So at least the form of that Ohio Derby, which I was dubious of exiting the race, it's so far been okay. If you think Flame Away in his second start off the bench can be a little bit tighter, I like that he's shown a little bit of life in the 2 most recent workouts ever since he's gotten up to Saratoga. On July the 13th, 4 furlongs and 47 and 4. On July 20th, 4 furlongs and 47 and 4. Based on the timing, the clocking anyway, he's at least shown that he's still got a little bit of oomph. 1.125 miles, debatable if that's really the distance that he wants. I think he's probably best going slightly shorter. But if you give him a very, very advantageous pace situation, and we have seen in recent years a race like this can be stolen on the front end, immediately the one that comes to mind is the Eric Guillot horse. His name is slipping my mind, but he was the maiden, and he shows up in the Jim Dandy, wires the field. I think there's a scenario where Flame Away could be out there and he could be all by his lonesome. I understand Rewrite has a little bit of early speed. I would have picked him in the Curlin on Friday over Hofberg. Instead, they choose to go here. And Sporting Chance, I just don't think he wants to go this far. He does love Saratoga, though. I think Flame Away, this is as good a situation as you could have drawn up if you're Mark Cassie and John Oxley and Jose Ortiz. You're on the inside. You look like you're controlling speed. And this is a lightish field. And your main competitors are going to be coming from last and second to last, in theory. I think this is an instance where you send them, you try to get a moderate half mile, and going into the far turn. Again, we talk about it so often. Use your speed to your advantage. Don't turn it into a sprint because you cannot outfinish Vino Rosso in tenfold. When you're out there, you got a little bit of a cushy lead. Let's say you get the half in 47 and 2, 48 and 2 rather. Let him out a notch going into the far turn. Spread eagle this field. Make Sporting Chance get off the bridle and try to come and get you. Make Rewrite have to move and really put the pressure on those deep closers. Because they're going to finish better than you are. But if you can put 4 or 5 or 6 lengths between you and them when they start, it might be too much to overcome on the main track. The Jim Dandy, it's not a big field, but I genuinely believe it's an important race now because this 3-year-old division, they're going to have to sort themselves out. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are big days for the 3-year-olds. We'll find out if Hofberg can run well in the Curlin on Friday. We'll find out what the heck happens on Saturday in this Jim Dandy. And then Sunday, we'll find out if Good Magic or anyone else shows up in the Haskell. These 3-year-olds, they've got to sort themselves out now that Boss is gone. Justify is out of the picture. Saturday, the Jim Dandy up at Saratoga. I think pace makes the race. I'm going to go with Flame Away over Tenfold, over Vino Rosso, mainly because Flame Away looks like he has a major, major tactical advantage. Other race from the spot that we'll go over Saturday here on the preview edition is the 9th race, the Grade 2 Bowling Green, a mile and 3/8 on the inner turf course. Let's take a look at the field. It's a nice field put together. This is arguably a Grade 1 caliber field, and this is the local prep for the Sword Dancer later on in the meeting. You'll also, I'm sure, get a few horses. It's a rather quick turnaround, but you might get a few horses that they end up sending out to Chicago to run in a race like the Arlington Million. 9 horses in here. Really, I think this race boils down to a couple of races that have already been run. You need to make a decision what you think of those races as a whole. Let's start off with the New York race anyway. They ran the Manhattan on Belmont Stakes Day. It was a giant blanket finish, but it's yielded some solid enough results thus far. First things first, let's go back and take a look at the stretch run. Here's Larry Colmus with the call.
Julio, a big long shot, turning for home in front. Manna Tulin on the outside comes on second. High Happy third toward the inside. Sadler's Joy is closing down the center of the course. And here he comes, trying to get these front runners. And Sadler's Joy has taken the lead, but from far, far behind, Spring Quality is closing down the center. And it's going to be Spring Quality to get up and win.
So, looking back at that, I think you need to make a decision what you think, because there were some trips in there. Some horses ran well. Some horses did some things that they don't normally do. Let's start off with Channel Maker, one of my favorite horses. I've always been a big fan of this horse. He had, I believe, the most troubled trip of everyone. Now, he may not have had the worst trip, but I think he had the most trouble in the trip, where he was never really allowed to run. Jose had him in behind horses, took a little while, finally found a seam late and came on with a little bit of run, got his final quarter in 22.64. The big problem with a horse like Channel Maker, he's 2 for 17 lifetime and 6 times second or third. It seems like he just doesn't really have a nose for the wire. I would be using him in some sort of multi-race wager if I decide to play the pick 4, the pick 5, anything like that, but I'd be lying if I said I had a lot of faith in him as far as winning is concerned. Then you go into some of the other runners in a spot like this. You've got the number 6, Sadler's Joy. Sadler's Joy had every opportunity to get the job done in the Manhattan, and he couldn't do it. Now, we've gone on a little bit of a run here. I understand he won that McDermott, but he's the horse that you just absolutely have to time the ride unbelievably well, because if you don't time it perfectly, he's going to make the front and he's going to pull himself up. We've seen it time and time again. So he's never going to win by 4 lengths. If he wins a race, he's going to win by a neck or a half. So he's going to give you a heart attack if you bet him. First things first. He's rock solid, super consistent. I mean, you go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 of his last 10 races are triple-digit buyers. He is rock solid. He shows up and runs his race each and every time. The question is, coming from dead last in a race that there should be a fair pace. I don't think it's going to be fast, but it's certainly not going to be slow. It should be a fair pace. Do you really want him coming from the back? Javier stays here. Leperoux has had the most success with him. Do with that what you will. We'll find out what you get from Sadler's Joy. He's a nice horse. Do I totally trust him on top? No, not at all. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he wins. If you play any multis, you have to use him. High Happy also exits the Manhattan. Now, High Happy was inside, basically contesting the lead throughout, and Timeform US had the interior fraction, one of them anyway, color-coded red, meaning it was fast. High Happy, I've always maintained, is better sitting off of a target than he is actually cutting out the fractions. There's a real scenario where he works out the ideal trip here on Saturday afternoon, sitting just off of Glorious Empire, who, no disrespect, I just think he's vastly overmatched in a race like this. If he sits just off of Glorious Empire, you could take this thing over, turn him for home, and it could be all over. Now, the problem that I had with High Happy, I was getting ready to pick him, and I was ready to just say, you know what, I like everything about it. He was super late to change leads. And he's not usually like that. This is a horse that's usually pretty professional. Now, maybe it was because he was in between horses, a little bit tight. I don't know what it was. But he didn't do it, and that's not usually his MO. Another one that I think you have to respect and you have to consider using if you're playing any sort of a multi-race wager. As far as other horses are concerned, Manitoulin. Now, I brought up the fact that Channel Maker may have had the most troubled trip, but he might not have had the worst trip. Manitoulin might have had the worst trip of them all because he was about 5 wide throughout the entire run, and he was still only beaten by 3/4 of a length. The tough thing to judge with Manitoulin, first things first, he was 30-1 that day. He's going to be a fraction of that price because everyone and their brothers saw how wide he was throughout. I think he's going to get bet in this spot. I wouldn't be surprised if he is the wise guy horse of the race. I think he's going to be in that sort of high single-digit range, 6, 7, 8-1, which it's a fair number, to be sure, but I don't know that it's truly indicative of his ability, considering that's the first time in his career, in 19 lifetime starts, that he had eclipsed a 100 Beyer speed figure. He arguably ran the best race of anyone in the Manhattan. I would just think long and hard and consider value. You know, is that really what he is? If it is, he's a major, major player. Or is he the horse that ran 6th in the Fort Marcy? Or is he the horse that even won the Hollywood Turf Cup last year with a 96 Beyer? 96 isn't going to get the job done. Now, the other race that I think we need to consider when talking about this race here, the Bowling Green on Saturday, is the United Nations from Monmouth Park, because you have the 2nd and 3rd place finishers exiting that race showing up here. We're going to show the replay of that race right now, and you're going to note that you've got Money Multiplier, who we know what Chad is capable of doing with this horse. Money Multiplier has always been a little bit more of a nibbler than anything. Then you also have Bigger Picture from Mike Maker, the 3rd place finisher. Now, Bigger Picture has run well at Saratoga in the past, but I do have to wonder. I mean, I was concerned coming into that race, into the United Nations, had we seen the best of Bigger Picture? Well, is he starting to trend off form? He's 7 years old. He's getting a little bit long in the tooth. He shows up with that effort. Now, is that more indicative of the field that they've faced in the United Nations, or is he just all of a sudden feeling better and he's ready to roll? As far as Money Multiplier is concerned, he's just very difficult to trust as far as a win contender is concerned. He's a very logical horse. He's paired up 103 Beyer speed figures, co-highest last out Beyer in the entire field. And he's got nice tactical speed. He's just a little bit tough to trust on top. He's the kind of horse that I would be more interested in using underneath for a key, using maybe, I don't know, a little bit more of an intriguing price. And ultimately, that more intriguing price is where I'm going to go in here. A horse that has always been cut out to be a good one is Highland Sky. We're going to show my PPs, the way that I have them all set up with my custom-made pieces with Formulator, throw some other figures in there as well. And I didn't write the note in Formulator, so you can see that big yellow bar at the top. That's actually me, just with my thing. Highland Sky is a horse that early on in his career was cut out to be and meant to be a very, very top-level turf runner, as evidenced by that 2nd place finish in the Belmont Derby as a 3-year-old. He finished just behind DeVille, and he finished ahead of Beach Patrol. The problem is after that, it just felt like he'd lost his way, and he never got any better. Now, I don't know if the most recent start at Belmont is a little bit of fool's gold, because when you look at it just strictly from a form standpoint, you had 2 horses that have exited that race that Highland Sky finished ahead of and defeated that have come back to earn 100 Beyer speed figures. The 2nd place finisher, Call Provision, was a next out winner up at Saratoga with a 100, and the 4th place finisher, Hello Don Julio, was unfortunately beaten that day with a 100 Beyer. Highland Sky earned a 103 in that spot. His 2 most recent starts, I've been impressed with both of them. The concern is the quality of those fields. The numbers stack up, but are they actually the same class as what he's going to have to deal with on Saturday? The reason I am more inclined to take a shot with a horse that just earned his first triple-digit Beyer in start number 17, as opposed to a horse like Manitoulin on the far outside, who earned his first triple-digit Beyer in start number 19, is because I think Manitoulin is going to get bet, and I don't think Highland Sky is going to get the same sort of attention at the windows. Highland Sky in his 2 most recent starts, there were optional claimers. He went off at 7-1 and 11-1. I think there's a real scenario that now he's going to be facing much better horses. He has a similar running style to some of these other closers. I think people will look at him and say he's just not that good. I think he goes off in the 15-1 range, which I would imagine is roughly twice the price that you're going to get on Manitoulin. That's why I'm more inclined to give Highland Sky a little bit of a nod as opposed to Manitoulin. I respect both of them, though. So this is a race to me. I think it's a spread race. I don't have any super strong conviction. If you're playing a multi, I think you got to use at least 3 or 4 horses seriously, and then you can use even more as far as backups are concerned. This is a salty one, and I think this is the opportunity in a sequence like this, knowing that the Jim Dandy is as short as it is, knowing that Vanderbilt, sure, there are a number of horses, but it really feels like 2 of them kind of stand out above everyone else, and then even the Amsterdam prior to that. You know, okay, it might be a little bit of a contentious race, but there's only 7 horses. This is the race where I think if you're going to find a price and you can catch something, this might be it. And I'm going to go and hopefully take a shot. I'm going to go with the number 1 Highland Sky in the Grade 2 Bowling Green on Saturday afternoon up at the Spa to wrap up our 2 races that we cover here on the preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show. If you've been listening live on Friday, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forum's Twitter handle, @DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forum's Facebook page. Thank you for doing so. If you listen to the show podcast form, like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, and Spotify. If you're over on YouTube, click the subscribe button, give us the thumbs up. Questions, comments, concerns, fire away in the underneath the video player. I'm usually pretty good about giving that a look once or twice a week. You can do the same thing over on Twitter, @Bernier_Matt. If you listen to this on iTunes, write us a review, give us a positive rating. It would be greatly, greatly appreciated. I will be back with a recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show on Tuesday. Be going over all the sorts of stakes action. We've got Grade 1 at Saratoga, Grade 1 out at Del Mar. You name it, we've got a bunch of things going on there. We'll give you a little bit of a stakes montage as well as the weekend's best buyer speed figure performances. Then we'll get you ready with the preview edition coming up later on next week, leading into a relatively large weekend up at the Spa. Whitney Saturday, next Saturday. But first things first, let's get through this weekend and see if these 3-year-olds can start to sort of get themselves situated. Whether it is Friday in the Curlin, whether it is Saturday in the Jim Dandy, or it is Sunday in the Grade 1 Haskell down at Monmouth Park. So best of luck however you're playing, whatever you're playing, wherever you're playing for this entire weekend. I will be back on Tuesday with the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show. Without further ado, as we always do, let's throw it into the latest edition out of the gate.